Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zach Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait!
100 years from now, people will look back through the NFL history books and see that the Jets beat the Giants 13-10 in overtime, and that's all that will matter. The Jets are 4-3. They're a game and a half out of first place in the AFC East. Those are the facts. How they got there is a little less impressive. We're going to look back on one of the ugliest games in the modern history of the NFL, plus a check-in on the injuries, look ahead to tomorrow's trade deadline. Lots to get to. I'm Tim McMaster, along with Zach Rosenblatt, our Jets reporter at The Athletic. Thanks for checking out the Can't Wait podcast. We are happy to have you here live, or if you're checking out the audio version, please subscribe. Give us a great review wherever you check us out. Zach, the Giants lining up for that field goal in the final minute, ahead by 3, seemingly going to put it out by 6. Would kick off. The Jets would have to go the length of the field. It really seemed like the Jets were cooked. In fact, there were members of the New York media who officially called it. They said the game was over.
One specifically.
I'm not gonna, throw anybody on the bus or anything, but if you're checking us out on YouTube, I'd have some Connor Hughes tweets out there. Connor, and
the good old Connor reverse jinx.
He jumped right into this after the fact and owned up to it to a degree, but he gave Brian Daboll immense credit for getting the Giants back on track at 3-5, and then talked about how the Jets managed to lose a game in which they only allowed -8 yards. That actually became -9 yards in overtime. So there you go. Your predecessor, Zach, Connor Hughes.
Oh man, that's why you never declare a game is over before like
Yogi Berra said something about that long ago.
Yeah. Well, especially there was a chance for the field goal to miss and improbable, but there was time for them to go up the field. So if they made the field goal, maybe you can even declare it, but even then that's a little there's certain scenarios where it makes sense to declare it dead, but that probably was not it. But we all have tweets like that come back to bite us. Not to defend Connor, but Connor does have a remarkable ability to reverse jinx pretty much anything. This is going into our personal lives, but he has a thing where among friends where he's literally jinxed relationships. He's told, I won't name who, but he's told a friend that he liked a girl that he was dating at the time. And then it turned out they dated, they broke up a few days later. And so he didn't tell me what he thought about Samantha because he didn't want to jinx our relationship.
Oh, well, that's good of him. That is good.
So he's self-aware of it, at least.
I will say that about Connor. He is self-aware for everything about it. All right. I guess we start with the final 24 seconds, right? There's no place better to start. And it starts with the field goal attempt. And the thing about breaking this game down is I feel like everywhere we're going to talk about where this game went right for the Jets, I guess, is where the Giants did things that historically we would expect the Jets to do. Not going for it on 4th and 1 with 24 seconds left deep in territory where you literally need 1 yard to end the game, and instead leaning on your field goal kicker who's already missed one kick on the day. And if he misses again, the field position changes a little bit. I mean, we'll start there. That was the first bad decision. And then for 24 seconds, Zach Wilson was brilliant.
Yeah, totally. If the devil's advocate of that decision is that the Jets offense hadn't really moved up the field at all. And, they would have had to score a touchdown if Graham Gano, who the Giants are paying a lot of money to be good, I think he's the highest.
Not good yesterday.
Not good yesterday. But yeah, I agree. I absolutely would have gone for it. It was this one felt even more improbable than that Browns game to a degree, just because of how bad everything had been up to that point. The fact
and how little time there was, right?
Yeah, how little time there was. Just knowing what I actually feel like what happened in the Broncos game wound up helping them, where they didn't spike the ball in time, because I'm sure they said they've been practicing it a lot. It was doubly impressive because they had a guy who had never played center in the NFL before and had just joined the team 2 weeks before.
By the way, they had way more ground to run and cover and get under and spike it in less time than
Than the
they did
Broncos won.
earlier this season when they screwed it up before halftime, right? Like,
Yeah,
it was a much more difficult
there was
situation.
there was no urgency the last time was the issue.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought that was, to be honest, like, I give them a ton of credit. There was not a lot of time to run 20. It was a 29-yard pass. So to run
Even
that
at the moment, I think everybody in the press box, and I'm sure everybody at home was like, they're not going to spike it again. They're not going to get it in time. They're not.
yeah, I didn't think there was any chance.
Field. And Alan Lazard actually explained today, like the way the route was, he was supposed to like basically set a pick for Malik Taylor to go to the sideline, and then it would be like a sideline throw. And then Zach got out of the pocket. Alan Lazard saw some open field, so he went to it. Zach hit him. And then Alan was like, he had to figure out if he had a chance to like go and score or if he needed to get down, and then he did. There's a part of this that I didn't even notice, like watching in the moment or the replays, but I guess the Giants didn't really do a good job of like getting in the way, like of like, delaying it, like
covering the ball and being annoying.
There to like try and like help like move bodies off, and then there weren't any bodies to move off. Like the Giants, they're a very undisciplined team generally, especially on offense, and I think you kind of saw that right there, especially. But that would have been a brutal loss, as Robert Saleh said. They don't. He has a way with words a lot of times. They don't ask why, they don't ask how. They ask how many like wins. So like at the end of the season, it counts as a win. So they're 4-3. A lot of concerns I think you can have coming out of this game, but the way they pulled off that 24 seconds, and once they did that, and you knew that the Giants were scared to throw the ball, which without saying it out loud, the way they played was clear. They were scared in a way that even the Jets with Zach Wilson have not been as like the Jets, even when they're scared with Zach Wilson to throw the ball, which I think to a degree they still are. They're still like calling passing plays. The Giants were just like straight up not doing it.
I'm trying to figure out how Tommy DeVito is in the NFL. No, I mean, I hate to say that about a professional.
You're a Syracuse guy, so you know a little more about him. Yeah,
I'm a Syracuse guy, and he was a big time recruit for Dino Babers. Like, oh, here comes a top 10, 4-star quarterback, and he couldn't get on the field, and they ended up going to the portal to replace him, basically.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think it's more. Like, it's fine if you have a guy like that maybe you believe in the ability to develop him, but for that to be your only option in a week where you knew Daniel Jones wasn't playing and you knew Tyrod Taylor was going to be playing behind the offensive line, and there's all this drama about how Daniel Jones was cleared on like Sunday, I believe. They could have had him as questionable instead of out. But anyway, they didn't want to play Daniel Jones because he was going against the Jets defense. Like, why wouldn't you have signed like Matt Barkley to the practice squad? Like, why not sign somebody like as a better emergency option than Tommy DeVito? Like, that lost them the game. If they had a quarterback who could complete a pass, the Jets do not win. Like, that's an absolute fact. Like, the Giants were handing the ball. They were pretty much announcing Saquon Barkley was getting the ball. He was still doing relatively well. I think if you look at the final box score, he did have over 100 yards, but it was on like 36 carries. So I think he averaged less than 4 yards a carry. Ultimately, like the Jets won that game largely because of how bad the Giants are. I think if that's almost any other team, I don't know that they pulled that off, but maybe I shouldn't say that, because the way the Jets play, everybody comes either up or down to the Jets level. Like, no matter what direction it is, somehow at the end of the game, it's a one possession game at the end. The Jets could have been down 14-0, or they could have been up 14-0.
There's something endearing about that.
Yeah. Every week we see this. It's the same ugly football. They haven't had a pretty football game yet. I think we called for this last year when they were winning. We're like, it'd be nice to have like a blowout, and they had the Bears blowout, and that was the last time they won. But this is their style of football. It's ugly. They have a quarterback who, we'll get into it. There's some people who have maybe gone over the top positive at the end of Zach's game. I think there's been some over the top negative. I think this is still the same quarterback that we've seen all year, and we'll get into more of that, and I'll explain what I mean. But yeah, ultimately the Jets won this game. If they had lost that game, it would have been absolutely brutal for all the context, obviously, with the negative passing yards and still losing, but also because this is supposed to be an easy stretch, and this is the worst team on that easy stretch. And if you lose to the Giants, then I don't think you could call any team easily like an easy win. And I think now you can still say, I don't know, you can say any team is an easy win, because as you look at the Chargers, they have Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler and Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. You look at the Raiders, they got Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, Max Crosby. Like, these are teams with like some elite talent. So it's not like they're much these teams might be better than the Giants. So anyway, my point being, the Jets eked it out. Ultimately, all that matters is that you win, especially for this organization that has had a hard time getting wins at all. I don't know how long it's sustainable to have the worst third down offense in the NFL by a wide margin. Like, it's not even close. I think they're converting like 22% of their third downs. I think the second to last team is the Browns, and they're at like 30 something percent. Like, that 10 percentage points in a stat like that is pretty wild. So whatever they're doing, it is an absolute disaster. Like, if you don't go against a team that goes 2 for 15 on third down, you probably don't win. And we'll say that a lot, but they did ultimately win. This defense is good. The special teams is great. I think that shouldn't be overlooked. This is a elite special teams unit. Like, Brant Boyer he's a godsend to this team, and it's a good reason why he's been around as long as he has here. But
I mean, Morstead was incredible.
Yeah,
I mean, I hope that he like iced the leg today and is getting off of it.
Is there a more popular punter in the league than him right now? Like, the Jets fans are obsessed with him. I probably have stoked the flames a little bit because I tweeted his PFF grade, which wasn't very good, and fans are rightfully mad. But I've been on the Thomas Morstead is the best player in the league train since the beginning of the year. So you guys need to catch up with me.
He was tremendous. It was 11 punts. So 13 for the Giants, 11 punts, 4 of them inside the 20, but 2 of them inside the 5. And I think a third, which was just outside the 5. So
yeah,
basically 3 between like the 3 and 7 yard line. He was incredible. I mean, of course, Sirline's just dependable.
But the thing is, he's been game changing for them all season. Like, remember the safeties they got this season were because he pinned the offense by the end zone. Like, he's been absolutely clutch. Dan Botter said maybe he can play right guard in the chat.
Well, and if they don't have
as a punter, he's jacked, by the way. So
if they don't have the, late in the fourth quarter there, he pins them deep and they're punting from their end zone. And the Jets they had a lot of bad penalties, but the 2 that really stand out is the offsides on a punt, which over the ball, not just offsides on a punt, but the ball is literally in front of you. And then the Jermaine Johnson roughing the passer when it was just the player was stopped. He was going nowhere, and that extended a drive that ended up being the Giants' lone touchdown. I mean, the Jets were flawed in this game, but a win's a win, like you mentioned. Before we get to the real penalty, well, I'm kind of in the penalties. So that was that. Let's do Zach. Let's jump into Zach a little bit. How's that? Then we'll go into the injuries. And
I just want to say one more thing about Morstead real quick before we go forward. An underrated thing that he did that I didn't notice till today because there was a clip of it. It was like a bad snap from Thomas Hennessy on, I think it was the game-winning field goal. Can't remember, but he adjusted it in time. He's been a really good holder too.
Laces out.
Yeah. So he deserves a lot of credit. And one more special teams note. Will McDonald, I tweeted this video last night.
That was awesome.
He jumped over the center. I don't know if he didn't tip it or block it or anything, but I think he disrupted it. Some people have disputed me on that, but the way he jumped over the center and used his long arms, which is all they hyped up when they drafted him to disrupt the Graham Gano miss. I definitely think that made an impact, and that was a pretty important moment. So
yeah, you never know for sure, but I feel like the way he came over the middle, Gano, I don't know where his eyes are exactly, but I think it had some kind of impact. And ridiculously, if the ball's heading in a certain trajectory, he would actually block that thing from the middle, which is,
it was the Myles Garrett type. Myles Garrett had that kind of play. It looked more freakish with Myles Garrett. It looked more. It's funny because everybody now knows Will McDonald's background, so everybody was referencing how he used to jump over cars, and so it was like he was jumping over a car. It was a little shorter than a car, so
it was easy. Yeah, Dan says McDonald would have blocked it if the kick was down the middle. That was a bad shank on the kick as he hooked it wide. All right, let's get into Zach a little bit. And this is those 2 throws in the 24 seconds, right? Just great throws. The second one on the move, outside the pocket, he hit Lazard in stride going back the other direction. The one along the sideline. I mean, he just makes these throws and you're like, okay, but then for 59 minutes and 36 seconds, it's scrambling. It's running backwards. It's bouncing the ball.
He held on to the ball. He held onto the ball in 4th and long late in the fourth quarter. Like that was when
sacked.
Connor, I think, declared the game over.
Yeah, well, you have to get rid of the ball.
That's the
It's
one thing
4th
you have to
down.
do.
You just got to get rid of the ball.
And he's not the
Just
first
throw it
quarterback to
up.
ever do that. That always blows my mind. Like taking a sack is the number one. Like getting an interception is better than taking a sack on a play like that. Like you got to throw it. Like no matter what.
Yeah,
I
at
don't care if
least
you think nobody's open. Like
yeah, throw it
mad at
deep,
him.
and then it's a punt,
Yeah.
right? Like even though
But
you
yeah.
can't punt in that situation, it's like at least the field
Yeah.
position game. Yeah, and then one thing that he hadn't been doing this year, and I feel like we've been as positive for Zach as possible this season, as far as like, okay, he's definitely shown signs, he's saying the right things, he's showing glimpses, like there's progress here. But the one thing that he hadn't really done this year that we saw all of last year, right, was the easy ones, like missing the easy ones. And they had the short third down where he rolled out and had Brees wide open for easily the first down. And then who knows what Brees does in open field, and he just bounces it to him. And
brutal.
I mean, it's a rainy day, but it's just, you can't have that.
Yeah. I was just thinking about it because Ryan Hamilton wrote in our chat. He turns into Joe Montana on the 2-minute drill after being horrible for 98% of the game. Like it makes me think of like the Tim Tebow mania era where he would like be bad for most of the game and then he would have this miraculous comeback at the end and lead them back. That's the thing. Like Zach, to his credit, even before he like fell apart last year, like if you remember that Steelers game, which the Jets hyped up like it was the best performance ever, like he was bad in the beginning of that game, and in the fourth quarter, he led them back to beat the Steelers in week 4. That was his first start. Everybody was optimistic. He was all confident. And he's kind of like had that all season this year outside of the Patriots game. Like he has an ability to move on from his mistakes, which is progress, certainly. And I do have, and yeah, this is the chat comment you just put up there is about how they should play more up tempo, go no huddle. Like they're not, I don't feel like I get that he's been bad, and a lot of times the play is called and it's the right play to be called and he doesn't execute it. But I also don't get a lot of the play calling. I don't get why they're not moving faster when that's clearly when he's at his best. They're not doing play action, RPOs, getting him out of the pocket, getting the ball out of his hands quickly.
Play action on first down, throwing on first down, right?
There's a few different third and shorts where they threw it when I don't know. I know the running game wasn't going great and the offensive line was struggling, but I don't know, on 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2, going with empty shotgun is not really the move I would have done. Like at least let the defense think you're going to run it or something. Like, and this team is clearly not confident enough to do the tush push, which I get, but it's a successful play, and they don't really do QB sneaks at all either. Maybe they just don't trust Zach on those. I don't know, but the third down offense is just ghastly, and a lot of that is Zach Wilson, but Nathaniel Hackett deserves some criticism there too. And it's, in some plays I get it. Garrett Wilson maybe is the only receiver that's open or whatever it is, or the receiver makes a mistake or there's a penalty. But I don't know. I think if they can just manifest whatever Zach does at the end of games to happen earlier in the game, then this could be a very good team. But we're halfway through the season and it hasn't happened yet. Like, I don't know. They came out of the bye. The offense looked the exact same as it did before the bye. I get their conditions, and the Giants' defense is unique in the way that it blitzes and pressures and all that stuff. And they were playing with Xavier Newman at center and Billy Turner at right guard, and all the other crap that was going on. But they need to figure out a better way to put Zach in position to succeed, because right now the plan that they have is just not working. So I don't know what the solution is. I do think getting a little more creative and throwing a little, maybe some trick plays or whatever it is, like it's just a very bland offense that they're calling right now. Like it's so boring and conservative, and I get it. And it clearly it's worked to the point where they're 4-3. They have a winning record. They're going to play like this every week. Me saying this is not going to change anything. It's going to be week 9. Like they're not going to all of a sudden change how they operate. I wish they would play more like they did in that Chiefs game though, because that was the game where they were getting him out of the pocket and they were having a little more fun. They were being more aggressive, and they just haven't done that since then or before that. So I don't know how they tap into that, but that's the game that you go back to because that was the best game Zach's ever played.
And I wonder if the reason for that, right? You go into this Giants game and okay, this is going to be a low scoring game. The Giants aren't going to score many points. Yeah. We just need to kind of like manage it and see what happens. And that's going to be true of a lot of games with this team because of this defense. But I think like with the Chiefs game, you're thinking, even with our really good defense, this is Patrick Mahomes, this is the Chiefs. Yeah. Like we need to score some points. And so they went out and actually tried to score some points. Whereas it seemed like the offense yesterday, right, was all right. If we can somehow get Breece Hall to bust 2 50-yard touchdowns, we're going to win this game. And he did bust one.
Yep.
And that, he only had 17 yards on 12 carries because this Giants defense is pretty good, and the Jets offensive line obviously was decimated, so they weren't going to run the ball. So that seems to be the theory, is like we manage it and hopefully we get lucky with a couple of big scores at some point, and we get a turnover and turn it into a touchdown. But you're right, that Chiefs game, they actually I think the mental. Going into the game, they were mentally thinking like we need to put up 28 points to win this game.
Yeah. And look, this is not going to be a team that's going to be in the top half of the league in scoring. They're just not with Zack at quarterback. But I even think about how, I feel like it shouldn't be, I don't think it can be overstated how good Garrett Wilson has been. I feel like his numbers don't even do, he had 7 catches for 100 yards. I get these tweets a lot. Imagine him with a great quarterback, because he's getting doubled most plays, I think, and he's not getting much separation because they're glued to him. He had the play where there was defensive pass interference and he still got a catch.
I can't believe he had 100 yards in that game. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I imagine he's frustrated because he knows how many opportunities are out there that he's not getting. He's doing a good job of keeping his mouth shut, and that to that degree. He's also their most provocative interview subject after games, because he was saying stuff like, we take this win with a grain of salt because we feel like we let the defense down. He's saying all this stuff. Him and Breece are standing next to each other saying this, and they're the two guys that have done their jobs at offense. Which is
great.
It's a great sign of leadership and all that stuff and maturity. But yeah, I don't know. Keep getting Garrett the ball. They every now and then they'll do the play where it's just a quick Garrett slant, and they don't do it as often as they should. And maybe the defense is covering it well. I haven't looked closely enough to say that, but get Garrett the ball more. 7 catches still isn't enough, frankly. We talked all the talk coming out of the bye, and you and I kind of poked fun at this about Xavier Gipson is going to have this huge role. He did get banged up, which is a part of it in the weather and all that stuff, but he played less snaps than Malik Taylor. So
by a lot. Malik Taylor 23 and Gibson 16.
Randall Cobb didn't play, by the way, because of his shoulder injury, and the snaps that normally go to him were kind of spread out among those two. Jason Brownlee played 2 snaps, so it's not like they were manufactured. Malik Taylor, by the way, maybe they should keep playing him, because anytime Zach Wilson throws it deep to him, something good happens. He drew a DPI,
game-winning DPI.
Yeah, game-winning DPI. From what I understand, Aaron Rodgers was not the one who called that. The last time, although Aaron Rodgers was on the headset and he was again an active voice, as I reported the last game. He was again. He's basically a coach on game day. He's got it. I was talking to somebody about this. He's got the perfect setup as an assistant coach in air quotes, because he only has to roll in on Saturday. Goes through the walkthrough with them, goes on Sunday, calls some plays, flies back to Malibu. Gets paid $35 million. Yeah,
that's not bad.
He figured out the perfect formula to be a coach. But yeah, I think they probably could stand at another receiver. I'm skeptical that they will, because ultimately, if the quarterback can't get them the ball, it's an issue. But I don't know. Whatever works when Zach Wilson is playing, where he turns his mind off like he does at the end of games, I get it. You can't go no huddle all game. The Chip Kelly offense doesn't really work in the NFL doing that nonstop, but moving with some tempo. And again, I've said this every week, getting him out of the pocket, doing RPOs, do more than just what they're doing. Cause it's not you're not going to survive with the worst third down. I know they're 4-3, but you're not going to survive with the worst third down offense in the NFL. They need to fix that. And Saleh can keep saying stuff we think it's going to come together, and when it does, it's going to be beautiful. Whatever his quote was today, I tweeted it wasn't that dramatic, but he said that a lot this season, and we're in week 9 and they still haven't figured it out. So the red zone offense and the third down offense need to get better, or this will not be a playoff team. I'm stating that as a fact. So
somehow their third down percentage went down on Sunday. I didn't think that was possible, considering how deeply they were in last place.
And they got one of them in overtime. So if they don't make it to overtime, then it's even worse than it was.
Then it's one for 13 or one for 14 in regulation, and then
something like that.
One in overtime.
Yeah.
Oh, Yeah, it's hard to watch, and they're literally, the broadcast is counting every single one of them. Like that's 0 for 8, 0 for 9, 0 for
Yeah,
10.
and I mean, I think extending back to the Eagles game, I think they had like 2 at the end of that game that they missed too. So that was like a combo of like 15 in a row or something crazy like that. Like that, it's just crazy to think about that they're 4 and like. I mean, I guess we can go back to the defense now to tie into that. Like the fact that they're 4 and 3 is entirely because of the defense and special teams. Like you can't have 4 wins and be the worst third down offense in the NFL while averaging like what I think they're averaging like 18 points a game. Like you can't. That's not a winning formula, and they have a winning record. So I don't really know what that means. It's kind of unprecedented. I'm gonna dig into that for a story I'm doing for like before the Chargers game, just like all the issues they have there and kind of the history of teams that have been this bad on third down. I can't imagine it's a very rich history, but they're kind of playing a very old school style football that they used to play before they even wore pads, which is you just run the ball and it gets ugly and nobody scores much and you just hope that you win at the end of it. You get out of there alive. And they haven't really gotten out of there alive because they lose somebody every time they win. You know, you kind of joked, I think it was on Twitter, they have like 4 wins and 3 Achilles stairs.
3 Achilles, yeah.
Like I actually haven't really gotten into the injuries that much yet.
That's next on my rundown here, Zach.
Yeah, so you can do that now.
By the way, the defense, I mean, in my mind, when you look at, they nearly played the perfect game. Now they were helped by DeVito and the play calling, obviously. Yeah. Not even having to worry about a pass is a nice place to be. But other than the Jermaine penalty, which led to the touchdown, I mean, the field goal early was because of the short field, the turnover.
Yep.
And then they basically didn't allow anything the whole game, and they would have maybe
given up a
field goal there. So
a lot of Tommy DeVito rushing touchdown, to be fair,
because of a penalty.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right. Otherwise, it would have been no touchdowns, 6 points, and they were just tremendous.
And
all right,
I'll shout out a few individual guys real quick on defense. Bryce Huff had another good game. Jermaine Johnson, outside of his penalty, I think he had 2 QB hits. Did he have 2 sacks? I can't remember.
I think he had 2 sacks.
Quincy Williams, I think he had 10 stops, which PFF defines as like a failure for the offense. Trying to think anybody else. I mean, the corners didn't really get much work, but if you look at their coverage numbers, they were obviously pretty good because they weren't really. Sauce had a comment about the Jalen Hyatt thing after the game, about how like they were ready to enshrine him for supposedly beating him in the preseason or whatever, and then it didn't happen. And Quentin Jefferson, he's been pretty solid as a pass rusher, and they're going to need more of him.
The half sack, yeah.
Yeah, and CJ Mosley, again, I think he's kind of like become underrated because I think fans always focus on the money with him, but I think he's a stud, and I don't think they would be where they are without CJ Mosley. So,
yeah, Mosley had the other half sack there. Jermaine Johnson did have 2 sacks, and Bryce had 1. Yeah. Most of that stuff was actually on when Taylor was going earlier in the game because they were actually dropping back to pass. All right, let's get to the injuries. Al Woods done for the year, obviously the Achilles. There, it's a position of strength. I feel like you don't want anybody to be missing for the season, but compared to the injuries on the other side of the ball, they'll be able to withstand the Al Woods injury.
Yeah, I mean, he was key as like a run stopper. I don't think he's been like amazing or anything, and he was a healthy scratch 1 week, but they have 4 defensive tackles, and he was one of them. So, they'll fill that either by calling up like Tanzel Smart from the practice squad, or I don't know, you could pick up somebody for cheap, maybe in a trade, but maybe you start using JFM more inside, and maybe that's a reason why you keep Carl Lawson around. I don't know, but it's not like a deathly blow. It's not an ideal one. And you feel bad for Al because that might be the end of his career. He's going to be 37, and it's a little different than a quarterback. He's a defensive tackle who, has a lot of weight on that Achilles. So I don't know if his career has much left. So yeah, they lose him. I imagine they'll call up. They have Tanzel Smart and Marquise Spencer on the practice squad. So either they call one of them up or you find a veteran, either in free agency or in a trade. But yeah, I think the offensive line is obviously the bigger deal.
Yeah, so Connor McGovern goes down first. That's a dislocated kneecap. May not need surgery, but he's on the IR. And then Wes Schweitzer, same thing to the IR for him. They lose both centers, and they ended up with
within the same quarter. Yeah,
in the second quarter, Xavier Newman comes in, fumbles the first one. Well, the exchange was fumbled, The second one almost goes over Zach's head. But then from there, they had no issues with the snap. But man, it's a tough spot to be in if you're Xavier Newman, who was signed to the practice squad this month for the Jets, and to be thrown in there. So actually, he did okay considering all of that.
I mean, they had a hard time with Dexter Lawrence, but that was an impossible spot for that interior to be in because you look at, you mentioned first Connor McGovern goes down, so you have to take Wes Schweitzer from right guard, move him to center, and you plug in Xavier Newman, who, frankly, before it was another, not Craig James, because I knew him, it was another Tay Hayes situation where I was like, I'm not entirely sure who this is. Like I was aware he was on the practice squad just because I wrote down all the guys they had at guard on the roster before this game, but didn't really know much about his background other than he was with the Titans previously. But then Wes Schweitzer goes down, goes straight to the locker room, which is never good. And they move Xavier Newman over to center, and they plug Billy Turner in at right guard. So like I literally tweeted that I've learned covering the Jets that every week you're going to see some shit that you've never seen before. And that's like, I've never seen a team have to do what they did at center. We saw Laken Tomlinson on the sideline practicing snaps just in case.
After the fumble, yeah.
Like Zach Wilson said that, Xavier, like, to his credit, when this wound up being like a huge moment, obviously, which we alluded to earlier, like Xavier Newman before that last drive was like, so like, what's the cadence if we have to spike it? Which is a very important thing. Like the timing, the cadence, like getting to the right spot. Like this guy has practice at center, I think, to a degree. And he told me that he played in the preseason a little at center for the Titans, but never in a game like this situation. So and Zach Wilson's like, that's a sign that we hadn't really practiced that together. So like a center and a quarterback, timing is everything. And so that's why you saw some issues there. But yeah, Dexter Lawrence had 15 pressures, which I don't think I've ever heard of a guy having that many in one game. And again, it's like you can't.
Yeah, we thought Micah Parsons made this line look bad, but
yeah, Dexter was wrecking havoc. And Kayvon Thibodeau had 3 sacks, including a strip sack around Mekhi Becton. Seems like Mekhi every game, he has like early in the game, he'll have like a big mess up like that. And then you kind of don't hear from the rest of the game much. One mistake, I guess you'll take. That was a brutal one in a brutal spot. But yeah, I mean, the offensive line, as always, is a concern. Like, I wrote about it today. I wrote it this morning and it was published at like noon or like 1. But there are options on the O-line. So I think there's some optimism that Joe Tippmann could return. I don't know if that would be this week or the week after. That would be a huge, huge boon, obviously. And you plug him in at center and you figure it out at right guard, whether it's Newman or Billy Turner. Probably will be Newman at this point. He has a little more time to practice, but I don't know that for sure. Dwayne Brown is a factor. I don't know that he'd be ready to play right away, even if he was activated, but that's going to be a fascinating thing to me to see what they do with him. Do you put him in at left tackle and move Mekhi Becton, who's probably earned that job? Or do you put Dwayne at a position he's never played, like right tackle or right guard? I don't really have an obvious answer or know what he's willing to do. I do think the Jets think he's one of their best 5 linemen. So that's going to be, Jason Peters is kind of the precedent for somebody like that. He played primary left tackle for the first like 14 years of his career. And then in the latter stages to stay around, he's played at like left guard and right guard. So I know it's not an easy transition, but Dwayne's a smart guy. So that might, I don't know, you might believe in him more at right guard than a Billy Turner or a Xavier Newman. I don't know though. But yeah, these are conversations they're going to be having. McGovern and Schweitzer are both on IR. They'll be out at least 4 weeks, and I don't really know how much soon after that they'd come back. I think McGovern, it seems like they feel better about, but I think they're still trying to figure out how serious his kneecap injury is. It's a tough for him. He's been for all the crap he gets from Jets fans, he's been very durable. I don't think he's missed a start. And it's other than maybe for COVID, I can't remember since he's been with the Jets. So, this is just 2 years in a row of like the worst luck I've ever seen on the offensive line. The Giants have had bad luck too, but you had last year with every single offensive tackle going down. And now this year you've already lost Dwayne Brown, you've lost Connor McGovern, you lost Elijah Vera Tucker, you lost Joe Tippmann, you lost Wes Schweitzer. That's 5 linemen I just named right there that are all starting caliber guys. Like, for all the criticism you want to give Joe Douglas, like that's impossible. You're not supposed to have a 3rd string center ready to go. Like that, criticizing Joe for the depth, like you can criticize him for having older players like Dwayne Brown, but you can't plan for Elijah Vera Tucker and Joe Tippmann to get hurt. So it's wild, and it's going to be the thing that holds back this offense even more than Zach Wilson. If they don't get better, because they were showing signs of life as we've talked about. But I don't know. Joseph Brennan just asked about if there's any chance of a Ben Jones signing.
A lot of
that.
Ben Jones chatter.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of that, and it makes sense to me. But for whatever reason, he hasn't signed with anybody. I don't know if he was still hurt from last year. He's older, and I don't get the sense that they're going to sign him. I do think they think Joe Tippmann's coming back soon. And if you think that Joe Tippmann's coming back soon, there's no really point of signing Ben Jones probably. But I do think they need to sign somebody, whether it's off a practice squad or something like that. There's some guys on other teams that they could sign off a practice squad, or free agents like Lel Collins is a popular one that fans are always bringing up. The Jets probably would have signed him by now if they really wanted to. I wrote down a few names in my story that are on practice squads. There's Billy Price on the Cowboys. He's been a starter in the league at center. James Ferentz on the Patriots. It would be fun to steal somebody from the Patriots, I feel like, for the Jets. But to Robert Saleh's point today on the trade market, everybody needs offensive linemen. Like, you saw that the Giants' offensive line was really bad too. Like, those are two of the worst ones. Washington has a terrible offensive line. Like, most teams have bad offensive lines outside of like the Eagles and the Chiefs and, maybe another team or two. Like, there's just not many good offensive lines. So teams aren't really itching to get rid of linemen unless they're tanking. And so I think I was going through, The Athletic does a lot of trade deadline coverage, which you should all check out, obviously. And some of the names that I've seen thrown around by the other beat writers, there's like Cody Whitehair on the Bears, but he's making like a lot of money. Who's the other one I just wrote down? Joseph Noteboom on the Rams. He's tackle guard. I think he's kind of fallen out of the rotation, but Jets don't have a lot of cap space or draft capital. So I don't see them making a huge splash, but if there's somebody out there to add for depth, then I'm sure Joe Douglas is working the phones to find it. I just don't think there's a great solution. So, someone else just mentioned Carter Warren. He's a rookie, can't play guard, so there's not really a spot for him. Max Mitchell did practice at guard before Dwayne Brown got hurt. Keith Carter told us, which is interesting at the very least, and maybe that would factor in the Dwayne Brown thing if you can play him at right guard. But anyway, as you can see, it's the only solutions are shuffling guys to positions they never played. Like, that's just kind of the spot the Jets are in.
Not a great spot. How about trading for other positions outside the offensive line? Do you see them making any moves? Or the last thing, I guess, mixed in with that is like trading something away. Carl Lawson not active on Sunday. Cook, very limited role again.
Yeah, I still lean towards them than towards nothing happening, but Carl Lawson being inactive did sound an alarm for me, because usually if you're trying to trade a guy, you don't play him right before it because you're risking him get hurt. At the same time, Will McDonald plays a role in special teams, so I kind of see why Carl Lawson doesn't have a role ultimately. I don't know. I would trade him if I can, but if you're just getting a 6th-round pick, like, I get also not moving him. And, as you saw with Denzel Mims last year, that was kind of like why they didn't trade him, because they needed him eventually, and then it worked out. So if they're going to trade either of them, I would guess Carl Lawson. I saw Jay Glazer reported that the Jets have been getting more calls on Michael Carter than Dalvin Cook, which is interesting. And if they traded Michael Carter away, then that would open up
Izzy,
free
Izzy,
who's still a healthy scratch. But yeah, I don't know. I would trade for a receiver would be the main thing I would do, and I would trade away Dalvin Cook if you could. But I don't know that either of those things are going to happen. So it might be a boring trade deadline tomorrow. We're going to talk to Joe Douglas at 4:15. I'm sure we'll cover a lot of big picture things since they might not do anything, but. He's certainly working
trade for a
right
Pro
now.
Bowl quarterback. We will have an emergency episode.
I will say two non-Jets or loosely tied to Jets trade deadlines. Leonard Williams was just traded today.
Yeah.
Second time in the contract year at the deadline traded. The Giants actually got more than the Jets did, but the Giants have to pay off some of his contract. I think it's like however many years to the day when that trade happened last time. But the other thing was the Packers just signed Rashawn Gary to a huge deal, and he was limited at the beginning of the season, but his numbers and his snap counts are pretty close to Bryce Huff, and Bryce Huff has gotten more pressure. So it's just something to keep in mind for the pay Bryce Huff crowd. I think his price is only going up with each passing week.
I know. I don't understand. I mean, it's tough to do it during the season, but man. And he had you wouldn't have, but they did a CBS. They had an interview before the game with him, and he was charming to go along with all the talent. So he was really good. There's reason to love him. He's a fan favorite for a reason. He's an easy guy to like, and he's obviously continues to get it done on the field, and he's going to be more and more expensive. Anything else before we say goodbye? Did we miss anything?
Well,
Any more questions from the...
Halloween is tomorrow. So I feel like I should just address. I feel like I maybe did last year. I just want to let everybody know that I am pro candy corn, and I know it's a
I'm
controversial
pro candy
opinion.
corn.
You are
I can
too.
get on that bandwagon.
Yeah. Well, people either hate it or they love it. So
yeah. I mean, it's
wanted to
just
put it out
sugar.
there. Yeah. Oh, it's pure sugar, but I love it. And they had some in the press box yesterday, which I appreciated. I have a very bad sweet tooth, and I've really cut back on sugar. But my girlfriend and I are both candy corn fans. Maybe that's why we're meant for each other. I don't know. But
what's your go-to Halloween candy?
Well, my favorite candy in general is Reese's peanut butter cups. But I was talking about this with Samantha, like when we used to trick or treat when we were younger, the ones you'd be most excited about. I always really liked those little Twizzler packs. It'd be like the two Twizzler, and like you'd rip open the plastic pack, and it's like the little two little ones. I always like little boxes of Nerds, and like Swedish Fish and Sour Patch Kids, like gummies for sure. And then like Reese's peanut butter cups were always my favorite. I've never been I've never been a big Kit Kat guy. They're like okay, and I've never liked particularly Snickers. I think maybe that's controversial.
Ooh, yeah, that is controversial. I mean, Reese's is my favorite too. But the thing is, like on Halloween now, you get the little bite-sized Reese's.
Yeah.
But if you can manage, if somebody's giving out like the single, not the double, but the single, but the full size Reese's, that's a big get.
Anytime there's a house that does like the adult size candy or whatever, it was always the popular one. Are you guys dressing up for Halloween?
I do. You've seen it, right? Didn't I?
I know. I wasn't sure if you were going to do it again on Tuesday or not.
Yeah. No, we are. I think there's a few streets up this way that kind of like let you do like trick-or-treating. Right in the city, it's weird trick-or-treating. There's huge buildings where you can actually trick-or-treat in the building door to door if you live there. We don't live in one of those. But we went, we won the family competition. I should have had the fake picture ready to show.
You guys over the weekend. You guys look very cute.
Yeah, there was this neighborhood event where they gave out awards, and we won first prize for the family. We did the if you give a mouse a cookie. Ailey was the mouse, and my wife Mandy did all the work in making her look like the perfect mouse with the overalls and everything.
Oh, it was great.
And then Mandy went as the cookie, and I was the milk carton.
And Marissa and Michael had some good Halloween stuff going on too. She was sending us some photos.
Yeah, Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Yep.
I am not dressing up. I don't really dress up these days. I don't have a kid to dress up with, so less motivation for me. But we might go to our... I was gonna say, well, first of all, I should say I'm getting a lot of crap for my candy opinions in here. I like almost all candy, I should say. I'm not a huge fan of Snickers. I would say I love Twix, I love Reese's, like all those little chocolate bars, Three Musketeers, Milky Way. Those are all good. So it's not like I hate everything. And somebody said candy corn tastes like a candle. I think you're wrong. So that's just what I'm saying.
See, some people get candy corn when it's like past its prime, and then it's terrible. But if you get fresh candy corn.
See, Samantha's weird, and she likes stale candy too. She thinks she likes the taste of stale candy. So she's weird though. So
okay. I can't remember what I was going to.
I don't know.
There's something
Halloween.
about the candy. Halloween. I don't know. Anyway, I think we've.
I mean, look how lame I am. I'm eating like low sugar candy because I'm like addicted to sugar. So.
Oh, I know. I was gonna say I hated Halloween growing up. I could never come up with like a good costume, but like having a young kid, like it changes it all. Suddenly, it's like a lot of fun, especially when I feel like I don't have to come up with a costume. So I just have to play along, and then it's
one of my best costumes was in college. I dressed up as a box of wine, and I had like the actual like bag like at the bottom, and I had a spout coming out, so people were drinking wine out of my costume. That was pretty popular. Yeah, that was pretty good.
How much wine?
It was like a full box of wine. So
like
it was
a box of wine.
Yeah, so there's like a decent amount in there, and there were photos of people like positioning themselves in an awkward spot. Frankly, to drink out of my spout. So,
yeah. All right. With that, we will say goodbye for this episode of Can't Wait. We'll be back later this week to preview Week 9 in the NFL. The Jets are 4-3. They're right in the thick of things, but they're going to have to play better than they did in Sunday's ugly win over the Giants. Thanks for checking us out on the Can't Wait podcast. We will talk to everybody soon.